The question that creates more breakthroughs in coaching than any other is only 4 words long, and most coaches walk right past it every single session. Keep watching to find out what it is. So, the best life coaching questions aren't complicated. They're simple, open-ended, and timed to land when your client is ready to go deeper. In this video, I'll walk you through a proven framework that gives your sessions real structure, the specific questions I come back to every single week, and that 4-word question that consistently opens up more breakthroughs than anything else in my toolkit. But there's something about how you ask coaching questions that matters way more than which ones you pick. And if you miss this, even brilliant questions fall flat. Let me start with the craft of asking, because this is where I see coaches struggle the most. The first rule is to match your question to the moment. It's tempting to walk into a session with a list of great questions ready to go. But coaching isn't a script. The right question is always the one that fits what your client just said, not the one you had queued up in your head. Some questions open up imagination, others help set specific goals, and others cut through someone's internal story. Reading the room and choosing accordingly, that's the actual skill, and it matters more than any list you'll ever find. The second rule is to keep every question genuinely open-ended. It's shockingly easy to slip into leading questions without even noticing. Don't you think it would help to set clearer boundaries? That sounds like a question, but it's actually advice with a question mark taped on. Compare that to how else could you approach this? That one has no destination baked in, which gives your client space to surprise both of you with what comes out. And the third rule, this is the one that changed my coaching more than anything else. After you ask a question, be quiet. Most coaches rush to fill the pause. If there's more than a few seconds of silence, they rephrase or jump in with something new. But the silence after a life coaching question is where the real work happens. Your client needs that space to go inward instead of just reacting, so ask your question and then sit with it. That discomfort you feel in the pause, that's a sign the question is doing exactly what it should. Those 3 rules will make every question you ask more effective. But they work even better inside a structure that gives your whole session direction. And there's one framework that completely changed how I run mine. The framework is called the GROW model. And once I started using it, my sessions stopped circling and started building towards something. GROW stands for goals, reality, options, and way forward. And it organizes your life coaching questions into a sequence, so each part of the conversation builds on what came before. Goals is where you start. You're helping your client name something specific, not, I want to be happier, but something concrete and internally motivated. The questions here are straightforward. What specifically do you want to accomplish? And how will your life change as a result of working on this goal? The clearer the goal, the more effective everything after it becomes. Then you move to reality, which is an honest look at where your client actually is right now. Where are you today in relation to this goal? And what have you already tried and what happened? This step highlights the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And without it, you're helping someone plan a trip without knowing the starting city. Options is where things get creative. If money and time weren't factors, what would you do? And what would change if this obstacle just disappeared? The key here is that your client generates their own solutions. You're not advising, you're expanding their thinking so they can see paths they couldn't see 5 minutes ago. And way forward is where you lock in action. Which of these options excites you the most? And what's the very first step you'd need to take? Here's one I love. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you'll follow through this week? And if they say 6, you ask, what would make that an 8? That single follow-up creates more accountability than most coaches realize. I set my coaching packages up on Paperbell with a clear session structure built in, and the GROW model maps perfectly onto that. Clients know what to expect, and I'm not scrambling to figure out where the conversation is headed. So now you've got the principles and the framework. But there's one moment in every coaching session that determines whether your client has a genuine breakthrough or just a nice conversation. This is the part I wish someone had explained to me years ago. When a client says, "I don't know," most coaches treat it like a dead end. They rephrase the question, try a different angle, or move on entirely. But "I don't know" is almost never actually true. It's a protective reflex, and what it really means is, "I'm not comfortable going there yet," or "I haven't given myself permission to want that," or sometimes, "I know the answer, and I'm afraid of what it means." Once you start hearing "I don't know" as a signal, instead of a stop sign, everything about your coaching shifts. Because now, instead of retreating from the question, you lean into it. You stay right there in that uncomfortable moment, because that's exactly where the breakthrough lives. The questions that make clients say, "I don't know," aren't your worst questions. They're actually your best ones, because they've clearly hit something real. And this is exactly where that 4-word question I've been building toward comes in. Remember what I promised at the beginning? Here it is. When your client says, "I don't know," you look at them and say, "What if you knew?" 4 words. And they're almost magic. That question stops people because it gives them an imaginary door to walk through. They're not committing to knowing, they're just entertaining the possibility. "Well, if I did know, I guess I'd say..." And once they step through that door, the real answer comes pouring out. 9 times out of 10, they absolutely knew all along. They just needed permission to say it. This is what I call a dig deeper question, and these simple ones do more heavy lifting than any elaborate technique. "What else?" is another powerful one. Your client gives you an answer and you just say, "What else?" Not because their first answer was wrong, but because the second and third answers are usually where the real insight lives. And what do you think might actually be behind that? That invites your client to look underneath their own response without you having to interpret it for them. These questions don't need context or setup. They work with any client at any point in a session, which is exactly why most coaches underestimate them. Now let me give you the specific questions I reach for at different moments, because timing matters just as much as the question itself. To open a session, you want something that hands your client ownership right away. My go-to is, "What would make this the most useful conversation you have all week?" It sets the agenda and tells your client that this is their time. Other strong openers I rotate through: "What's most alive for you right now?" And "What would be the best use of our time today?" For getting clients unstuck, which is honestly about half of what coaching is, these are the ones I keep coming back to. How has that approach been working out for you? That one is beautifully direct because it puts your client face to face with the fact that their current strategy isn't delivering without you having to say it. "What will it cost you if nothing changes?" raises the stakes naturally. And "What's the smallest possible step you could take right now?" That breaks paralysis, because often the real obstacle isn't that the path is unclear, it's that the first step feels impossibly big. For envisioning the future, go bigger than your client is comfortable with. If you got everything you wanted, what would your life look like a year from now? And if you really want to open things up, try a miracle question. If you woke up tomorrow and everything had changed for the better, what's the very first thing you'd notice? That question bypasses all the practical objections and goes straight to what the client actually wants. And it creates this vivid picture they can work backward from. And to close a session, lock in the learning. What's your biggest takeaway from today? And what's one thing you'll do differently before we talk again? I build closing questions like these right into my coaching packages on Paperbell, so clients know the structure from the start. These aren't just polite wrap-ups. They're what turns a great conversation into real behavior change. So here's how all of this comes together. You don't need to memorize 73 questions. You need a framework like GROW that gives your sessions direction. A handful of go-to questions for opening, closing, and getting unstuck. And those dig deeper questions. What if you knew? And what else? Because those do more real work than everything else combined. If you want a place to organize your coaching packages and build this kind of session structure into your practice, I use Paperbell. Each package gets its own page with the price, the session flow, and booking all in one place. So I spend my energy on coaching, not on juggling tools. You can try it free, and the link is in the description. Now pick 3 questions from this video that resonated with you and use them in your very next session. Pay attention to which ones land and which ones don't, because that's how you build your own question toolkit, one conversation at a time.